Hey everybody, it's me again. 2023 is over, and I did not technically get to 52 books this year, but I did read this Mark Twain collection that was actually like 4 full books, 20-something essays, a bunch of short stories and shit, so there's a lot of stuff in there. Also, I got a subscription to a monthly poetry magazine from my absolutely wonderful friend Simona Berman. Thank you very much. That was a bunch of reading. Also, I wrote a book, and that took a bunch of time. So anyhow, I got 42 books this year in the Tim Werenko 2023 reading list Thunderdome / Highlander There Can Be Only One Combat. And here are the books in the order in which I read them. Gilead, A Visit from the Goon Squad. Nevermore. Babel, Zona, a book about a film about a journey to a room. The American Way of Death, revisited. Seeing Like a State. How certain schemes to improve the human condition have failed. Indie Theater Guy, In Green's Jungle, Roadside Picnic, Heart of Darkness, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and Other Lessons from the Crematory. A Doll's House, Return to the Whorl, Bridge of San Luis Rey, Between the World and Me, Portable Faulkner, Birnam Wood, Moonstruck, the original screenplay, Thrust, The Man with the Golden Gun, Song of Solomon, Warriors Don't Cry, You Better Be Lightning, The Candy House, The Leopard, The Troll Garden, Once There Was a War, Ahab's Wife, or The Stargazer, The Displacements, Crook Manifesto, The Age of Innocence, From a Certain Point of View, Star Wars, A Masterpiece in Disarray, David Lynch's Dune, An Oral History, How Beautiful We Were, The Gods of Mars, In Canaan, The Family Mark Twain, Beach Music, Pulling the Chariot of the Sun, A Memoir of a Kidnapping, The Iliad, and Braiding Sweetgrass. Okay, here we go. Matchup number 1, Gilead by Marilyn Robinson versus Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Gilead is a man solemnly bestowing the memories of his father and his grandfather unto his son, and the whole thing feels so very important. Won the Pulitzer Prize. It's pretty beloved. It is an interesting pairing of the serenity of spiritual wholeness and prayer against the bloody action of the grandfather character, who actually fought as an abolitionist, like violently fought, so he like was preaching with blood on his shirt. So there's an interesting tension there, but it just didn't connect with me. Maybe it's a tonal thing, I don't know. I didn't love it. It just felt so very important. But on the other hand, Between the World and Me, that just felt like a fucking shot across the bow. It is a letter from a father to his teenage son about growing up in a world where violence is directed against black people and his personal experiences growing up. Maybe it's a personal experience type thing, but it felt very immediate, very raw. It was just fucking brilliant. It gets compared to The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, and it is completely justified. This book is fucking fantastic, and it's absolutely the winner here. Next, we bounce over a bit and go to Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison versus The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. Listen, I'm a white guy. I'm a nerd. You don't have to tell me. I live with it every day. So yeah, I like Edith Wharton. I like her a lot, and this book is really good. It's way better than the movie, and the movie's really good, so I highly recommend it. But on the other hand, Song of Solomon is just fucking it's killer. So Song of Solomon is definitely the winner here. The main character is this guy named Milkman. He gets that name because he breastfeeds till he's like 4 years old, and there's a lot going on just in that one thing. So you're like 50 pages in, and there's a huge amount of things happening. It is a really, really ambitious, amazing piece of work. I loved this book, and I am sorry, Edith, but that is the winner here. Next up on the list, we've got Moonstruck by John Patrick Shanley versus Warriors Don't Cry, a searing memoir of the battle to integrate Little Rock's Central High School by Melba Patillo Beals. Moonstruck was a gift by the love of my life, and I loved reading it. It is just a perfect fucking script. I love this thing so much. It is kind of an amazing piece of work in that there's no explicit antagonist. It's all about internal stuff. It's love, family, joy. It's romance, it's sex, it is everything that makes life awesome. And it's New York City. It is absolutely wonderful. I loved this. So it was really interesting to read the shooting script before it was made into a film. I loved it. It was great. Warriors Don't Cry is just fucking troubling. It's about the Little Rock Nine, who were the first black students to integrate into a white high school. What a fucking nightmare these people endured at the hands of their freaking neighbors. I don't know. Maybe it's a cautionary tale of times to come. I fucking hope not. But the rage that those children suffered at the hands of people that they knew, it's clinically fucking insane. Incredible story, but I gotta go Moonstruck for the win on this one here. Next up, Birnam Wood by Eleanor Catton versus Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'd heard a lot about Birnam Wood, and I really liked her first book, The Rehearsal, and I liked the show Luminaries. I haven't read the book, but I like that. So I kind of liked Eleanor Catton. I was expecting a lot from this book, and it's good. It's really good. It's about a group of climate activists who work on farming at public land, and they give the food away. And these idealists run up against a billionaire guy who's trying to extract minerals illegally, and guess what? Shenanigans ensue. It is smart. It's well-paced. It's a real page-turner, but this fucking Babel book... Holy shnikes, man. This thing came out of nowhere. It was a gift from my friend Kate Niet, and it's goddamn amazing. It is about magic and words, the power of words, spells. It's about revolution, racism. It takes place in a fictional alternate history. It's so fucking badass and great. I loved this book. It's a long book, but it moves right along. Absolutely the winner here. Next up is Nevermore by Edgar Allan Poe versus Seeing Like a State, How Certain Schemes to Improve the Human Condition Have Failed by James C. Scott. This version of Nevermore is a graphic novel, and that was cool. I'm not a huge fan of Poe, but I got it in a Christmas sort of giveaway thing last year, and it's from my friend Gamal, and I love that guy, so I read it, and it was nice to see the visualized stuff. So, this classic had new life to it, but Seeing Like a State, holy shnikes, man, this thing is one hell of a book. The basic idea is that government, quote-unquote, wants people to exist in homogeneous groups. The state is utterly blind to small groups, outliers. If your group is small enough, the government can't see you, so they don't care about you. The implications of this idea are just freaking huge. It is a fantastic read. It is very academic, so there's lots of case studies, but it is, every single page is just fucking fantastic. It is a great book, but again, it's an academic book, so read it at your own risk, but definitely read it. It's great. Next up, Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan versus the Portable Faulkner. All right, so let me start. William Faulkner wrote nearly all of his books and all of his short stories about this fictional county called Yoknapatawpha County. Just about everything takes place there. It's kind of the MCU before the MCU. It's the FLU, the Faulknerian Literary Universe, I guess. And at one point he was asked what order to read his books, because they kind of jump all over the place. And he said there isn't a correct order, but if you read this version of the Portable Faulkner, it's a really good way to experience that world, that town, that county. So I looked for it for years when I was younger, and it finally showed up in the for sale bin in my library like 10 years ago. So if you know a little bit about what my life was like 10 years ago, it was a bit of turmoil. And so this book was started, set aside, and lost till now. And I read it, and I loved it. I love revisiting all these characters and stories I'd not experienced in a long, long time. I really, really enjoyed reading this book. It was great. But holy fuck, this Visit from a Goon Squad thing is the shit. It's been on my list for a while, and I finally got around to it. It is definitely the winner here. There'll be more on this one later, but yes, definitely the winner is Goon Squad. Next up, we've got In Green's Jungle by Gene Wolfe versus Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. My youngest child, Annika, is pursuing a career as a funeral director. So, like the dad nerd that I am, I started reading up on it. I read 2 books about this subject over the course of the year. This one was more irreverent and fun. It's written by a young woman who kind of stumbled into profession, and it's a really lovely book. But I also read 2 books from Gene Wolfe this year. I love Gene Wolfe. He is a challenging read, and I read these 2 books. They are the final books in a 12-book series. This was the second to last book, and I loved it. If you have not read Gene Wolfe, for the love of God, do not start with this one. This is the end of like 3,000 pages of sci-fi. I loved it. I'm a fucking nerd. I don't recommend it to novices, but if you are into this sort of thing, go back to the beginning of this series, and it's great. And look up Gene Wolfe. He's fucking fantastic. I love this book. It was the winner here. Next up, Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad versus the Indie Theater Guy by Martin Denton. Full disclosure, Martin Denton is a friend. He ran a website years ago dedicated to indie theater back when websites were cool and new. So it was a long time ago. He was a champion of a little show called Elephant Man the Musical, written by my dear, dear friend Jeff Hilton, whom I love. He wrote it years ago, and then he invited me to work with him on rewriting it and shortening it to put together another version of it and put it up on its feet. And it actually ran in the small space in the West Village for over a year, like a million years ago. Martin published our play in a collection of plays, and I've been rich and famous ever since. Kidding. Actually, this book is a memoir of those low-budget, no-budget indie downtown fringe festival early days. And he was right there, and it was his passion, and he is just a wonderful person, and it was a treat to read that and revisit those days. Go down memory lane with Martin. Martin, thank you for everything you did. You are a hero. Unfortunately, you're up against the Heart of Darkness. This thing is a towering work of literature. It's one of the 4 things that made me want to be a writer. I reread it this year because I went to a screening of Apocalypse Now, and I just wanted to dive into the source material. So it wins here, and more on this one later because it's complicated. Anyhow, next up is The Troll Garden by Willa Cather versus From a Certain Point of View, which is a collection of short stories revolving around Star Wars. It is an expanded type of universe thing. So, I don't know. So, okay. In the movie Star Wars, you see R5-D4, and he is malfunctioning as he goes away from the Jawas off to Luke. But what you don't see in the movie, and what this book contains, is just a lovely little short story about how R2-D2 and R5-D4 communicated to each other in the Sandcrawler, so that R5-D4 actually knew the importance of R2's mission with the Death Star plans. So when R5-D4 gets chosen, he malfunctions on purpose, heroically sacrificing himself so that R2 could continue with his mission with the Death Star plans. Now, listen, if you have no idea what I just said, this is not the book for you. If you go, oh, that's cool, then this is the fucking book for you. It's great. It really, really is. But in a head-to-head, I got to give this one to The Troll Garden, another collection of short stories. When I was a kid, I read Willa Cather. We read My Antonia in high school, and it turns out I was a child, so I just was too young. I was reading a great book at the wrong time. So anyhow, I just love Willa Cather. These are short stories revolving around being a creative person in a world that is not super receptive to that, especially if you're a woman. This book was a total surprise for me. I found it in a used bookstore. I'd never even heard of it before. It was great and absolutely the winner here. Next up, Roadside Picnic by Arkady Strugacki versus American Way of Death Revisited by Jessica Mitford. Okay, Roadside Picnic is a sci-fi book from the Soviet-era Russia. It was the basis for a film called Stalker, which is absolutely one of my favorites because I am, as I've stated before, a big freaking nerd. Anyhow, the idea of this book is that at some point, aliens stopped on Earth for a short time and then left, like it was a picnic. Get it? And the area where they landed is now just filled with psychic happenings and filled with the inexplicable. I like this book a lot, but man, I love the movie. The movie just takes the book as sort of a launch pad and expands on it. Anyhow, it was really, really neat to read the source material, which I'd never read before, and yet I'd seen the movie several times, so that was that. And The American Way of Death was a super success when it came out. The author sort of blew the lid off the world of mortuaries. She wrote this in the 60s. She kind of went undercover in the mortuary world, and the public really had no idea that, shockingly, it's a business. So it was really eye-opening. It was a real, real big deal when it came out. But reading it this year, it felt kind of dated. It was suggested to me by my friend Anne, and I'm very happy that I read it. But in this matchup, I got to go with Picnic. So that's the winner. Speaking of Roadside Picnic, the next pairing is Zona, a book about a film about a journey to a room by Jeff Dyer versus The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Thornton Wilder. Let's start there. Bridge of San Luis Rey is about a bridge that falls down, kills some people, and the narrator tries to make sense out of it and prove that God has a plan. It is a very short book, but I have to say it didn't really connect with me. I did not love it. I found it a chore to come back to. I fucking love Our Town, also by Wilder, and I was kind of surprised that I did not connect with this. I don't know what I was expecting. It just turns out this thing wasn't for me. On the other hand, Zona is absolutely one of the weirdest, wildest, craziest, most enjoyable reads I had this year. I think this book might be written for me and only me in the universe. So I actually do not recommend this to anyone unless you really, really love the movie Stalker. It's one of my favorites. So this is like more than just a behind the scenes. Instead, it's like watching the movie with someone who has a huge wealth of knowledge about the material, and they just expand on the ideas as it rolls along, and it opens up all these different ideas and creative outlets that this was an inspiration for. It's freaking fantastic. I loved this book. It's a little bit like pop-up videos used to be, but for like a whole movie in book form. I freaking love this book. The winner's definitely Zona. Next up, Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen versus Return to the Whorl by Gene Wolfe. I read Doll's House because I was going to be having lunch with some friends who were seeing the Broadway production, which had Jessica Chastain in, and I wanted to be able to talk about it. And I love Doll's House. I read it when I was in high school. I read it again to brush up on it. I get why it's a big deal. I get why it's regarded highly. I didn't connect with it. Maybe if I saw the production, because that is sort of the deal. Scripts and plays, they are really just the building blocks of an actual presentation of a live action thing. And I didn't see that. So maybe it might have been great. I don't know. But it didn't connect with me. On the other hand, this other thing was the final book of a long-running series from Gene Wolfe. And he has passed away. So this was it. This is the end of the thing. So if you are into Gene Wolfe, fantastic. Keep going. The ending is very satisfying. It is the winner in this matchup. I loved it, but this is not the place to start if you are interested in really, really challenging sci-fi. So it wins for me, but not for everyone. So there you go. Next up, The Iliad by Homer. This is the Emily Wilson translation. She got super famous doing the Odyssey a little while back, and that was great. Versus In Canaan by Shane McCrae. Okay, this is the second longest book I read versus absolutely the shortest book, and both of them are poems. Just sort of worked out that way. In Canaan is a collection of poems from the point of view of an enslaved person who has murdered her child so that the child will never have to live the nightmare that she's living. It is amazing. It's fucking intense. It's like the literary equivalent of like sobbing and trying to catch your breath and talk and coherently convey some ideas that are just overwhelming. It is absolutely an incredible piece of work. I loved this thing. It is, it challenged my sensibility of like what you can do with written words. It's fucking fantastic. It is really far-ranging despite the fact that it is a very, very, very short book. I think it's less than 50 pages. It's fucking great though. Anyhow, it just has the bad luck of being up against the Iliad, and it's the fucking Iliad, man. Not only is it great, but again, you know, Emily Wilson's translation is like just making this into a whole new book. It is a page turner. It is not difficult to read. It's super conversational. It is an incredible accomplishment, and it's got to be the winner here. So winner is the Iliad. Next up, Crook Manifesto by Colson Whitehead versus Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Crook Manifesto is book 2 in a series about this guy named Ray Carney and a cast of characters around him in Harlem. It's a sequel to Harlem Shuffle, which I also loved. This one takes place from 1971 through 1976, and I loved every bit of it. Braiding Sweetgrass, on the other hand, is a book about reciprocity. And that's how the world should exist between Earth and humans. And it is written by a woman who is a scientist, but she's also Native American. So she brings this duality to her perspective on nature and how we should be treating the Earth. It is great. I just found it kind of a bit long. And it just was hitting the same nail on the head over and over again. And it's fine. It's totally great. It feels like a series of blogs. But anyhow, I go with Crook Manifesto here, but Braiding Sweetgrass is good. Next up, Masterpiece in Disarray, David Lynch's Dune, an oral history by Max Every, and literally about 1 billion other people who contribute to this. It's like an incredible thing. Versus The Family Mark Twain by guess who? Mark Twain. Okay, first up, let me talk about Mark Twain because it is absolutely not going to win in this matchup, but let me just say a quick thing about it. Life on the Mississippi, Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer, Connecticut Yankee, Tom Sawyer Abroad. There's a shit ton of essays, a lot of short stories. And this was my slow read. This year I read 6 pages a day on this thing every day to get through the whole thing. It's like, I don't know, 1,600 pages. It's a huge fucking gigantic stack. But some things that I was struck by, man, we are a violent people. Tom and Huck are just children. They witness multiple murders. They are shot at on a regular basis. They casually just happen to know how dead bodies should be floating when someone drowns or burns to death. Life on the Mississippi is just full of fucking grisly accidents, and just everything in life was so precarious at the time. Oh, and also, remember the end of Connecticut Yankee where he electrocutes hundreds and hundreds of knights so the field is covered in dead bodies? You probably don't. You're probably thinking of that Eclipse thing because that's like entertaining and cute, and Bugs Bunny did a thing on it. But anyhow, just the amount of violence in our blood is just fucking overwhelming. So yeah, Mark Twain is brilliant, okay? He's a writer who worked, and he wrote a lot of stuff, and some of it was brilliant, like Huck Finn, which is one of my all-time favorite books, and some of it is just fucking not, like Tom Sawyer Abroad, which is absolutely unbelievably stupid, and he must have just needed to pay a bill, because it's terrible. Anyway, it gives me great respect for him as a human being instead of like this sort of literary god, so I'm really glad I read this, but I am not reading this book again. On the other hand, Masterpiece in Disarray, this book is something else. It is an oral history of the David Lynch Dune, which is a terrible movie, and I always wish that it were magically about to just suddenly, inexplicably be good. It never is. The book is a gift, however. If you love films, or David Lynch, or just how films get made and the complexity of it, this is exhaustive in its research, and sometimes it's a bit tedious, but man, it's really, really fascinating. It's totally great. Winner is Disarray. Next up is The Candy House by Jennifer Egan versus Beach Music by Pat Conroy. Candy House, it's not so much of a sequel as it is a continuation of the Goon Squad book. Now, had they been put together into one giant, 600 or 700 page book, I might have liked it better. I don't know. As it is, it feels like a season 2 of a show where you just completely loved season 1. I don't know, it's something like that, maybe sophomore slump. I don't know what you call it, but it's very, very good. It's more of the same of the first book, so it's a continuation. It's really worth the read. You know, there's Beach Music, which is like 3 books all put into one. I doubt any publisher today would put this book out. It's very long, but it's doing a lot. This was a recommendation from my friend Kate, the person who brought me Babel this year. So whenever somebody that awesome recommends something, I'm giving it a shot. And it is really good. It's kind of incredible in its ambition. It's about the 60s, it's about the protests, it's about family, alcoholism, crime, murder. It's about taking responsibility for your actions. It's about the Holocaust. It spans generations. The breadth of the book is just freaking amazing. The author's prose is absolutely gorgeous, just freaking fantastic. Anyhow, in this one, it's really very, very close. I'm probably going to go with Candy House, though, so that would be the winner on this one. Next up is Seeing Like a State, How Certain Schemes to Improve the Human Condition Have Failed, versus The Man with the Golden Gun. The Man with the Golden Gun had a bye in the first round, so it's up against Seeing Like a State. So let me just say, I've never read any Ian Fleming before. I started reading this book, and I literally have no fucking idea why James Bond ever got to be popular. This book, it fucking sucked. If you hate women and really don't like your stories to make sense, well, this is your book. No contest here. The winner is Seeing Like a State. Next up is Ahab's Wife, or The Stargazer, by Senna Jeter Naslund versus Babel. Ahab's Wife it's a guilty pleasure for me. You may or may not know, I love Moby Dick, and this is like 700 pages of fan fiction about this fictional woman who's mentioned very, very briefly in Moby Dick, because Ahab is in fact married and she's waiting for him. We never meet her, but in this book, it's all about her. And it's like she just happens to be present and meet like every poet and author and scientist who happens to exist in her time. You have to be a real nerd to enjoy this book. I am that nerd, but it was nothing compared to Babel. Babel just fucking rocked. Next up, You Better Be Lightning by Andrea Gibson versus Between the World and Me. Okay, Andrea Gibson is a poet who is pretty publicly dealing with an incurable cancer. She is an amazing poet who is staring at death every day, yet she finds joy, not just pain. in every moment of life, and it's a lesson. She conveys it through her poetry, and this book is something I highly recommend. It is absolutely wonderful, but it just happens to be up against Between the World and Me, and maybe it's the dad in me. Maybe I'm just a curious white guy. I am not black. I can never understand what that experience is, but I am a dad. I am a human being, and I love when there is a genius at work, and that is definitely what's going on here. So I got to go with Between the World and Me. That is the winner here. Next up is Thrust by Lydia Yuknavitch versus A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan. Thrust was probably the craziest book of the year, and I have to say I loved it. There's a girl who can connect with a physical object and use it to travel through time. So doing that, she meets up with a cast of characters throughout history, from French sculptor to a brothel owner to a group of people who are assembling the Statue of Liberty in New York. It's kind of bananas. It's very surprising. It is all over the map, and I really loved it. It has so much energy. It is a really, really great book. But I didn't love it more than Goon Squad. Every chapter is its own really separate, beautiful creation that reflects on others and points the way to new chapters. There's one particular chapter that is just PowerPoint presentations, and the narrator of that chapter maps out in one sequence how her autistic brother wants to say the phrase, "I love you," but his brain connects 6 or 7 other dots silently and internally, so that when he wants to say "I love you," the statement that comes out of his mouth is about the Steve Miller Band. And having a child on the spectrum, I can fucking tell you, this was one of the most emotional things I've ever experienced in reading in my lifetime. It changed my life. It changed my relationship and understanding of my own child. I wish I read it 20 years ago so that I could have had better conversations. I cannot overstate the way that this book hit me. So that is definitely the winner here. Goon Squad. All right, next up is Pulling the Chariot of the Sun, a memoir of a kidnapping by Shane McCrae, versus Zona, a book about a film about a journey to a room. Chariot versus Zone. Okay, Shane McCrae, I mentioned earlier. He wrote that very short book of poetry. Well, he wrote this very, very strange autobiography. It's one of the weirdest I've ever read. So he was born to an interracial couple. White mom and black dad. His mom's parents were real hardcore racist, so much so that they did not want their grandchild around his dad. So they kidnapped him and raised him. And this book is a collection of his memories and how he lived through that for years. It's about how memories are important and true, and they are the building blocks of who we are and our identity, but they're also not facts. Memories fade. They fail us. They're important, but they are also unreliable. And this book is an amazing story that constantly doubts itself. The writing is wonderful. Unfortunately, though, it's unrelentingly dark. Understandably so, but there you have it. It's really good. So I recommend it. It is great. Shane McCrae is definitely a writer that I'm going to watch. This is my first time dealing with him, and he was great. But like I said, Zona, earlier I mentioned, it just fucking scratched an itch for me that I didn't even know that I have. I love Stalker, the Tarkovsky film, and then this author uses those events to connect them to other books and other works of art. So now, it led me to how this band called Stars of a Lid uses audio from the Stalker in like one of their songs, and now I'm a fan of theirs. Anyhow, creativity is just like throwing a rock in a pond. The waves reverberate out. This book is about that, and it is just great. And again, I think it might only have been just written for me and only me, so I recommend it to me. And if you're a person who loves the crazy things that I do, then it might be for you as well. But anyhow, I loved it, and that's the winner. Next up is The Gods of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs versus Roadside Picnic. And Edgar Rice Burroughs, that guy, he really knows how to write adventure stories, and I kind of weirdly love him, but he's also a racist, and even on Mars, the races are just always at war with each other. It's kind of troubling. There's no like insight into that. It's just, well, they're just going to always fight because they're different, and that's just it. So the point of the thing is to just move things along and make action happen, and it really, really delivers on that. But it's like empty calories. It's fun, but there's nothing really there. Anyhow, Roadside Picnic is definitely better. It's more of a difficult read, but it's a way better book. So there you go. Moonstruck versus How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo Mbue. I love Moonstruck. I really do love it, but I love the movie Moonstruck. I also love the script, but screenplays are meant to be building blocks on which a film is constructed. That being said, I love Moonstruck. But How Beautiful We Were is fucking amazing, man. It's really, really great. It's about this fictional village in Africa that's being exploited by an oil company. People try to fight back. It's heartbreaking. It's heroic. The characters are wonderful. The insight into life in this little village is great, and pair that against like what life is like in the city, not too far from them. It's really great. Everyone should read this book. It's fucking fantastic. Moonstruck, sorry, I'll always love you, but Beautiful is just a better book. So there you go. Next up is The Leopard by Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. I am absolutely mangling that. Sorry, pal. Next to Heart of Darkness. The Leopard was made into a film that was directed by Luciano Visconti. I saw that film in a restored version at BAM with my friend Ted Lewis, so he's the one who turned me on to this. In some ways, I kind of weirdly like the film more. Not only because of Claudia Cardinal, but that don't hurt. It's because it slims down some of the book's excesses. It is a good book, but it is not a great book. It's definitely good, though. I was happy to have found it in a used bookstore, so I'm glad I read it. But Heart of Darkness is a great book, but it is flawed, like deeply flawed. I would suggest anyone who's read Heart of Darkness actually go out, find the Chinua Achebe essay on it. It is a real eye-opening reevaluation of this classic in terms that the author simply cannot grasp the idea of black people as, you know, people. They're just props. They're symbols of savagery throughout the whole book, and the book is brilliant, and it's really, really amazing. It is disheartening that the author, who is so sensitive and brilliant and articulate, is unable to see that there's a humanity there. So that's disappointing, but still there's so much going on in that book, and it was so influential in my life. I just think it's a little bit better than Leopard. In Green's Jungle by Gene Wolfe versus Once There Was a War by John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck is one of the great authors on the world stage, and this is not one of his great books. That's why you probably never heard of it. It's marginally interesting, some sort of reporting, I guess you'd call it that. I don't know, whatever. There's better versions of what he's doing in this about World War II. Skip it unless you're like doing a paper on Steinbeck. I don't know. Also, In Green's Jungle, I love it. But again, don't read it unless you've read the first 10 books. If you have, let me know. It's great. I love it. Winter's the Jungle. Next up is The Displacements by Bruce Holsinger versus Return to the Whorl. Displacements is a roller coaster of a page turner. It is great. It is about this family that survives just barely the world's first Category 6 hurricane. It's brutal. The book gets into a massive number of people who would be refugees and how they are displaced, hence the title. It's very, very well done. The family drama stuff is pretty good. The tension in the camps, drug issues, anti-government people are a bit caricaturish. I don't know. But the book's a great read. It is a good eye-opening thing to what's going to happen in the environment at some point if we keep going down the road we're going. Storms get worse, and this is like the destination. So anyway, it's very good, but it is no Return to the Whorl. What's going on in Return to the Whorl is so fucking ambitious. What happened on that generational ship that took hundreds of years to get where it's going, and how they end up where they are, and dealing with magic and psychic connections. I love Gene Wolfe. He's always challenging, but he's always great. I love that. So Return to the Whorl is definitely the winner. Next up, A Visit from the Goon Squad versus A Masterpiece in Disarray. Okay. I seriously loved reading every detail of the script drafts and the costuming issues, and the point of why there's pugs in the movie that gets addressed. Everything about Dune is fucking fascinating, and it just utterly fell apart. And yet it is this beloved movie. Everyone knows this version of this thing that is generally regarded as a piece of crap, which it is. This book is great. It's fantastic, and I completely and totally recommend this. It's just that Goon Squad's way better. The winner is definitely Goon Squad. It takes place in the 90s in New York, and man, when she mentioned Leshko's, this shitty diner on 7th Street and Avenue A, I was just brought back to my college days. So I loved the fact that I sort of walked the streets of this book and this story, and it really immortalized those times in that area, and it just was great. Really, Goon Squad is definitely the winner. All right, next up is Between The World and Me versus Crook Manifesto, and this sucks because I love both of these books. I really, really do. I don't know how to pick. It's not which one is better. They're both great. You should read both of them. It's freaking fantastic. I guess I'm going to go Crook Manifesto. I love the first book. I loved getting back into the lives of these characters. I liked that it was in the 70s. I maybe could relate a little more to the Harlem of the 70s. Not that I lived in there or that I knew that, but like I had more of a reference to that and the places and the time. I just loved it. Anyway, I can't wait for the third book. I love this whole series. It's great. Crook wins. Next up, Roadside Picnic versus Song of Solomon. Picnic's good, but freaking Song of Solomon is just fucking swinging for the fences. The ambition of what Toni Morrison is doing here is amazing. And I gotta say, the economy of her writing is fucking aspirational. It's amazing. It's a pretty short book, and the range of different types of characters, locations, actions, settings, small town, big city, super rural, men, women, children, it's incredible. It is really, really a fantastic book. It's really hard to put down. Go get this book. It's great. Here we go. Zona versus In Green's Jungle. Like I said before, I love Gene Wolfe. I fucking love that whole body of work. But this Zona book just came out of nowhere. I loved every page. It's got to win here. We're fucking flying now. Return to the Whorl versus Heart of Darkness. All right. Listen, I hold Heart of Darkness in tension because I appreciate its genius, but I also recognize this enormous blind spot in it. So it's tough. I think it's better than Return to the Whorl. I don't know. It's complicated, so I probably go with Heart of Darkness. There you go. Next up is How Beautiful We Were versus Troll Garden. Listen, I love both of these books, but short story collections always have trouble with me getting a toehold, so Troll Garden's great, but some better than others, and ultimately, Beautiful is sprawling and heart-wrenching experience, and it never takes a misstep. It's great. I gotta go with How Beautiful We Were. It's a really fantastic book. Oh my goodness. Here we go. Okay, keeping going. Babel versus Candy House. Listen, I'm not a huge fan of books about magic. I'm really not. I don't get it, whatever. And I was a little reluctant to read it, knowing what Babel was about, like reading the back cover. But man, the world is so fucking incredible, totally fully realized. It is a work of genius. I loved this. This writer is fucking incredible. And so is Jennifer Egan, by the way. But Candy House has that season 2 thing going, so it's great. It's really great. And if Goon Squad didn't exist, it'd probably win. But I'm sorry, Goon Squad existed, and so it just felt like a little bit of a letdown. So in this patchup, I'm going with Babel, but just by a hair. Both are really great books. Next one is Gilead versus Seeing Like a State. Okay, Seeing Like a State is an academic book. It is absolutely worth reading. If anyone is thinking about getting into politics, it should be required reading. It is really an amazing, amazing work. But the Iliad is the fucking Iliad, man. Just a quick thing that I just wanted to mention that I was really struck by. I read this book in, I think, the Fitzgerald translation back when I was in college. And this time I was particularly struck by how well the enemies regarded each other. So the Trojans are at home, they're in Troy, the Greeks are invading them, and they've been on the beach for like 9 years doing nothing. At the start of the book, Agamemnon, the leader of the Greeks, is bitching about how he's being unfairly treated. I know, right? A leader crying about how unfairly he's being treated. It's crazy. I can't believe that happened. Anyway, the battle gets going, and there's gods and heroes and narrative that switches back and forth. But the interesting thing is that no one ever dehumanizes the enemy. Never. They'll go on and on about how godlike and magnificent and everyone is on the other side over and over and over. But like modern warfare and the propaganda surrounding it leading up to any war, it's all about dehumanizing the enemy. But not here. When these guys killed people, it was an intimate, up-close, and violent thing. They were literally murdering another human being. They knew it. They didn't shy away from the truth of that. And I was just struck by the honor and respect that they had for each other. And I know Achilles is a different story, but anyhow, that was just really striking to me, so it definitely is the winner. Iliad. There you go. Crook Manifesto versus Zona. So fuck you, list. This is not good. Both are great books. I love Crook Manifesto in a huge way, but there's 2 points of why I'm picking Zona. One, it's a collection of short stories or long stories or novellas or something, but it's different. Two, it's the middle book in a series. It is great. It's really, really great. And I was literally surprised, like on every page in Zona. So, I don't know, man. I love them both. I think Zona might be just written for me and only me. So again, read Colson Whitehead. He's a genius. Everything the guy writes is fucking fantastic. The guy can't make a bad book. He is goddamn genius. But if I'm being honest, my personal take in this matchup, I enjoyed Zona more. So there you go. That's how it's going to be. So this is my list. That's what I'm doing. Next up, Song of Solomon versus the Goon Squad. This might be the hardest matchup of the year. But the experimental nature of the narratives, one chapter with the PowerPoint, it's too fucking much for me. I can't even talk about how much this book affected me and how it touched my soul. Anyway, please do read Song of Solomon. It's fucking brilliant. But for me in this matchup, Goon Squad really, really touched me. So there you go. Iliad versus Beautiful. This is another hard one. But here's the thing about the Iliad. It was written like 2,500 years ago for an audience that completely knew the whole story. They were not in suspense about the outcome. Keep in mind, they were also Greeks. So they were really waiting for the Greeks to win because they knew that was what was going to happen. So a lot of this book is just getting the Greeks slaughtered so that they could have this sort of rise from the ashes triumphant arc. And it's very effective. It really, really works. But because of the original target audience who knew the whole story, there's just lists and lists of individuals and specific killings and how they die and their family history for every single death. So one thing that's happening is, like I said earlier, they're all being humanized. They're all individuals. It is interesting. But the audience knew the story. They knew the fall of Troy. But this book is weird. It ends before you get there. The Trojan horse, all that, that's not in this book. That doesn't happen there. The fall of Troy, it doesn't happen here. All of that ending is just assumed, so it gets put off. So it requires some context and reevaluation to really, really get into this book. Beautiful, you don't have to do any work on that. It's a tough book, but it's complete, and it is goddamned amazing. So here I'm going to give the winner to Beautiful. Coming down home stretch, people. Here we go. Babel versus Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness, you have met your match. I have no complicated feelings about Babel at all. Absolutely fantastic book. I fucking love this book. Winner's Babel. Next up is Zona versus Beautiful. I've talked a lot about it. Beautiful is beautiful. It is a better book. It just is. It's doing more. It's more important. It's gorgeous. I loved every single page. But Zona was something that just connected to me in the interest of my life. Tarkovsky, Russian literature, sci-fi, aliens, obscure art, poetry. I don't know what to say. I just fucking love Zona. It's like just, it was my thing. So there you go. Oh my God. We're almost there. Babel versus Goon Squad. Jesus fucking Christ, people. All right. This one's really hard. But ultimately, Goon Squad just connected to me fully intellectually, fully emotionally, like very few things in literature ever have. I would say probably not since Portrait of the Artist hit me like a ton of bricks in high school, except this is more complicated, more far-reaching, and I've just lived more and experienced more, and Goon Squad wins. All right, so that brings us up to our final match, Zona versus Goon Squad. And here we are. Finally, the winner of the Tim Werenko 2023 reading list Thunderdome / Highlander, There Can Be Only One Combat is Visit from the Goon Squad. Fucking incredible book. I loved every single bit of it, and you should go out and read it. But next year might be a little bit different, because as I mentioned earlier, I wrote a book. So hopefully you'll all be saying that my book was the best book of the year next year. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Doing my best to get that thing published, and I wish you all the best. Happy New Year. Go out and read a book. It might just open your eyes. It might just change the way you see the world. Hug a loved one. See you next year, guys. Bye-bye.